Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the CRS Improvement Stakeholder Update. My name is Molly de Camp. I work at RECCo, and I will be taking you through some housekeeping and some high-level agenda before handing over to Bilal from DCC. Next slide, please, Bilal. So welcome, everybody. Just some housekeeping before we get going. So during the event, if you could keep your camera and your microphone off. If you could use the Microsoft Q&A to ask any questions, the chat will be available and you will be able to raise your hand at points during the webinar. If you keep your questions relevant and avoid mentioning other organisations, please. And also, questions may be visible to others after the event. This event will be recorded and we will also share it on YouTube and our website. Thank you. Next slide, please, Bilal. Your speakers today, as I've said, my name is Molly de Camp and I work as a service manager at RECCo. Then we have Bilal from DCC and we have Jason Hines. Bilal will present after myself and then Jason will go into the detail of the plan. Next slide, please. So contents. So welcome and introduction. Welcome everybody. It's really great to see a good response and see that you're all interested in the CRS update. So hopefully you will get a good overview of the CRS Improvement Plan today and a chance to ask any questions and provide any feedback at the end. Bilal will give an overview of the CRS Improvement Plan. We'll then go into the work streams and where your input is important and where we'll be asking as we go along the deliverables, where we'll be asking for your input and support. We'll then go into work in progress and next steps. And then at the end, there'll be a chance for some Q&A where you can put the chat either into the chat or raise your hand. Next steps, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Bilal now, who will do welcome and introduction.
Fantastic. Thanks, Molly. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Bilal from the DCC. So I head up the switching from an operational perspective. So all the kind of engagements on address matching and switching in my space. I'm going to give the overview in terms of what the aims and objectives are today. And then I'll walk you through a background overview in terms of the journey that we've been on before I hand over to Jason. So just to give you a snippet overview in terms of what you will hopefully get out of the call today. So the key piece around today is to give you an overview with regards to the work that we've done with RECCo over the past few months. So the key objective of the work has been to produce an improvement plan. So we'll give you some context in terms of what the background is and why we're doing this. We'll share with you the focus areas and the projects that we're working on. And we'll also share the anticipated benefits that we can expect as well on the back of it. The key purpose of today is to get your views. So that's the whole purpose of this engagement today is we want to hear your thoughts as to whether the problems that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis is reflected within the plan. We also want your support in order to engage and understand whether the things that we're working on are going to be kind of future-proofing some of the things that you've alluded to as your pain points as well. So please do engage, whether that's in the chat or kind of throughout the session as well. The last kind of key call out in terms of objective is to gain your support on the ongoing engagement and the direction in developing this plan. The whole purpose of the plan is to ensure that we align to your pain points to ensure that we deliver things that matter to you and our consumers as well. So that's the key objectives for today. In terms of background, so I'm just going to take you on a bit of a journey and just give you an overview in terms of the things that we've been doing collectively with RECCo over the past few months. So as you're all aware, in December, DCC was awarded the CRS license. And post that decision, Ofgem asked RECCo and DCC to jointly develop a CRS improvement plan, which essentially considered all of the opportunities that were identified as part of the consultation. So since January early this year, we've been working closely with RECCo in order to develop an actual CRS improvement plan. And what we've been doing is working collaboratively in order to build, deliver, and implement, which is going to be the bit that we go through later on in this session, a CRS improvement plan. The ultimate aim of this improvement plan is to ensure that it aligns to the customer needs and it delivers tangible improvements to the service as well. The construction of a plan was considered both, so we've considered both the opportunities that were identified as part of the consultation during the license renewal, but we've also incorporated some suggestions and feedback that was given last year as part of the switching incentives regime engagement survey as well. So it's not just the input that you gave and industry gave as part of the consultation, it's also the engagements that we've had with yourselves over the course of the last 12 months as part of the surveys as well. So I'm pleased to say that we've now completed the development of the CRS Improvement Plan, and we have also shared that plan with Ofgem, which they've accepted the overview in terms of what we shared with them. You'll also be pleased to know that we've actually started work, so all of the plans that are going to be shared with you today, we've got some pending progress against them as well. In terms of today, we'll share the details of the plan, we'll share the intended benefits, and what we'll do is seek your input in terms of, again, whether we're headed in the right directions or if we're missing anything in relation to the plan as well. So hopefully, like I said, if you can engage, if you can share your thoughts throughout the session, and then we'll try and answer them either throughout the call or we'll take them away. I'll now pass you over to Jason, who will walk through the detailed plan. Jason.
Hey, thank you, Bilal. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jason Hines, and I work as part of service operations within DCC. Bilal, I've tried to take control, but I can't. So if you can continue to steer me through the slides, that would be appreciated. So thank you. So this afternoon, I'm going to take you through the next few sections in the slide pack, and I'll give you an overview of the plan and a bit more detail on the work streams and the anticipated benefits that we're expecting to see. So at the top level, the improvements plan that we've constructed consists of 5 work streams, and we've got 12 projects that we've scoped across those 5 work streams. And you'll see a bit more detail about those in some of the later slides. The work streams and the projects have been scoped and shaped collaboratively between DCC and RECCo over the last 2 or 3 months. And we've engaged users as well along the way. So we've been to SOF and SAF on a couple of occasions to make sure that we're heading in the right directions. We've started to shape the plan, and today is intended, as Bilal and Molly have laid out, to build on that engagement and support us as we move forward into the next stage of delivery of the plan. So the work streams that we've shaped, as Bilal mentioned previously, have been they're identified by Ofgem in its license decision response, and we've also considered as Ofgem, as Bilal also mentioned, the feedback that we got through last year's switching incentive regime survey. And you can see on this particular slide what the work streams are. So you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to read verbatim through most of the slides in this pack, but I am going to read verbatim through this particular slide because I think it's important that everybody understands the objectives that we've set out in each of these work streams. So in terms of the first work stream, and this is probably the wordiest objective, so address data quality. It's setting out to improve industry and consumer outcomes by targeting specific issues identified through a greater understanding of the impact of poor address data quality, coupled with a supporting address data quality improvement process with clear outcomes and mutually agreed responsibilities. So accepting that there are a lot of words there, what this is setting out to try and achieve is basically through a better understanding, which is data driven, of the things that are driving issues with address data quality, is formulating A, a view of what we need to target, and B, supporting processes to allow us to target specific improvements that have been identified through the data, and being really clear through that process who needs to do what in the execution of that. Change management is the second work stream, and this is all about delivering change more quickly and economically through a refined change management process that provides a greater degree of engagement, communication, and certainty for users. We've got an engagement and communications work stream, which is about rationalising and improving the quality of interactions between DCC, RECCo, and the code manager with users in accordance with users' requirements, and that will lead to better relationships, understanding, and improved service delivery. Incident management workstream is around delivering incident resolutions more quickly and keeping users better informed of progress and potential solutions through improved communications an improved knowledge base and increased use of self-service. And finally, the fifth work stream is reporting, and this is focusing on delivering a more efficient and cost-effective reporting framework that meets users' requirements and supports increased transparency and understanding of switching service performance. Okay, so if you move on to the next slide, please, Bilal. And so next on to the benefits. So they're the 5 work streams, and what are the benefit themes that we expect to drive through targeting those work streams. So as we've worked through the CRS improvements, we've identified the areas where we expect to see benefits as a result of doing this work. And in the later slides, you'll see that we start to describe these benefits in terms of efficiency savings, which could ultimately be related to cost drivers, or more qualitative benefits, whether that sits with industry, consumers, or more generally across a number of areas. One thing that I will say is at the moment, what you won't see in this presentation are any firm pound signs. And the reason for that is that as we've started to scope and shape this work, a number of the changes that we describe within the plan will incur costs. And as a result of that, we'll need to impact assess the changes to establish the firmer cost benefit position as those costs become clearer. And as you'll start to see later, this is an area where we will be looking in some cases for your help to help us shore up the benefits and ultimately prioritisation, where we might have some prioritisation decisions to be made around what we tackle and in what order. So the purpose of this slide at this level is really to just show that as we've worked through shaping the improvements, we've seen some common benefit themes across all of the 5 work streams. So broadly, these are efficiency. So where we talk about efficiency benefits, this is ultimately where we would expect to see logically some sort of financial gain. Quality. It wouldn't be a plan if there wasn't a quality component to it, but this is about addressing areas where we might not currently be meeting your needs as users of the service, or it may be in particular aspects of the operation of the service are not reflective of how you are using it today. And then benefits around transparency and understanding. And this is about recognising where comms and engagement can be improved to remove uncertainty or ambiguity in the service. Okay, if you move us on, Bilal. So how are we going to monitor progress and ensure up the cost and benefits position? So don't worry, I'm not going to try and walk through this slide line by line, but the purpose here is to basically show that look, we've got a good view of what needs to be done and when, and that includes along the bottom of this slide where we've got some cost positions that will become clearer as we move through the later stages or the next stages of the plan. In terms of how we'll hold ourselves to account, well, we've got joint governance in place between DCC and RECCo, and we'll be reporting progress to Ofgem on a quarterly basis. And in addition to that, we'll be keeping the RECPAB updated with progress and, of course, yourselves through the ongoing engagement that we'll be setting out to do, which we'll talk about later on in the pack. So if you move on to the next slide, Bilal. I think we have a question.
Yeah, this is one of our polls.
One of the polls. So you should be able to answer this. Hopefully you can see the question. So are there any, based on what you've seen so far, are there any other areas that you believe that we should consider as part of the CRS Improvement Plan? And I think that as we start to get feedback, this should start to populate a word cloud, Laura, if I'm right. Okay. Guess we let that play out in the background. We can come back to the input from that towards the end. Bill, I'll suggest we move on to the next slide. So work streams and an input from the folks in the session today. So something that you will hear, you've heard it a few times already, and you'll continue to hear it, is that we don't want to assume that we know best around the things that are important to you and then consumers from the CRS. So we talked earlier about the collaboration that's taken place between RECCo and DCC in the formulation of the plan up to this point. But from a collaboration point of view, it's also collaboration with you as users of the service, which is just, if not more important, as we move into the next stage of the plan. And lots of reasons for that, but the primary driver is it's vital that we make sure that in any delivery or execution of any plan that we are focusing on the things that you recognise as being important and where you can see benefit to us doing and focusing our attention. So in terms of ongoing engagement, we'll be setting out regular mechanisms to ensure that engagement between us is meaningful and productive, and that's important. And that's important for a few reasons. And the reasons that are outlined on this slide, it's really important that we've always got a clear view of your opinions about the current service and how you use it today. It's important that we always fully understand your requirements and the priorities for an improved service. We don't want to be focusing on things and spending money on things that you don't recognise as important or delivering benefit. On that benefit theme, it's important that we are collectively aligned on the benefits that any improvements might be delivering and what they mean for industry and for end consumers as a whole. And then when we get into understanding which ones are we going to take forward, or where do we start to set priority, that we get endorsements from you as a user community, and particularly where there could be any cost considerations or benefit positions to consider. And then really, really importantly is making sure that as we go through the delivery of the plan, that we make sure that everybody is kept updated with progress. Okay, so next slide, please. And I think we've got another poll. So I'm hoping somewhere we've got some feedback coming in from these polls, but the second poll is thinking about the sort of engagements and particularly around the CRS Improvement Plan specifically, and any issues or pain points you might be experiencing today. What in particular would you like to get out of engagement between DCC and RECCo? So again, I suggest we let that play out in the background, and in the meantime, Bill, we move on. Okay, so the next 5 slides are effectively one pages which give an overall summary, relatively high level, of each of the 5 work streams that we laid out earlier. So in each of these slides, what you'll see is we've got a view of key milestones. You'll spot some red markers in there, which are points of engagement with our user community, and a high-level view, which is running along the bottom line, of when we expect to make an assessment of any benefits that might have been delivered as a result of improvements that have been made in the plan. So again, I'm not going to talk through absolutely everything that's on all of these slides, but I will pull out the key points to note for each of these work streams. So first up is the address data quality work streams, and probably the first thing to note up front is that there are really close ties between this work stream and the work that's underway as part of the annual quality plan. So there'll be a fair degree of commonality between the two, between this plan and what's addressed through AQP. The primary focus here to call out is work around the unmatched address pot, and there's somewhere in the region of about 2.5 million unmatched addresses currently in that pot. And there are 3 key things that I probably want to just call out around this particular work stream and the stages that it's going through. So the first stage is around analysing the unmatched addresses to characterise and group into buckets, for want of a better word, those different categories of unmatched address. And then once that's done, that will allow us then to start to work out what needs to be done to fix those addresses, and just as importantly, by who. So who needs to do what to fix them. In parallel to that taking place, and that's already kicked off, we'll want to be working with our user community again to impact assess what we identify within those different buckets. And that's really to help us understand, so which of those things is really causing pain or impacting consumers. So we can then start to really collectively target our efforts on fixing the things that matter. We have a suspicion, which we hope to prove through data and through discussion with yourselves, that there are probably some things that sit within that unmatched address pot that it really won't make much difference to anybody if we don't do anything with it. So it's important that in those sorts of situations that we can identify that and make sure that we are collectively not expanding effort in an area which isn't going to give us any payback or make any difference to the service. The third thing to call out is once that's been done is when we know what the important things are to fix, and just as importantly, what's good's going to look like. So what are the targets that we're setting out to try and achieve in each of those buckets? We start to apply fixes through a series of quality improvement sprints that you can see running along the third line of this plan. And we expect those to start in the summer, and we expect that to involve not just DCC and its service providers, but also, again, the user community of the service working together to fix the data in line with the processes that we identify and draft around the bucket characterization. So given the iterative nature of those sprints, what we're anticipating doing at the moment is pausing and reviewing the effectiveness of the fixes that we're applying on a bi-monthly basis to assess the effectiveness and work out if we need to do any course correction or make any changes. In terms of benefits on this one, so in the medium to long term, we would expect to see a cost impact to address data quality resources, and that could be data quality resources that are either expended within DCC and its service provider community, or it could reach out into again industry and service users as we are able to target our resources more effectively onto the things that matter. However, just a note of caution at the moment on that one, because depending on the outcome of the unmatched analysis and the prioritisation, there could be a need to, in the near term, increase resources. And that could be that if we identify some significant buckets with significant volume in there that might have a fairly complex process to tackle, we might need to shore that up with resources to tackle it in the near term. As I've said already, from an industry perspective, it's probably reasonable to assume similar efficiency rationale could apply as we focus resources on the most productive areas. And the other thing from a data-driven approach is if we can start to show clear linkages with things like failed switches and erroneous transfers through the data and the analysis that we're doing, which at the moment is not necessarily always clear, then there could be opportunities in that space too. Tackling the address data quality. Okay, so that's probably all I want to say on the address data quality stream. I can see another poll popping up, but I think we're a little bit early with this poll at the moment. We'll park that one for now, and when we get to the end of the workstream slides, that question's relevant. I'd like you to ask to let us know if there's anything else you think we should be focusing on. So the next work stream is the change management work stream, and the central theme that's driving the change management improvements is that the current change process just takes too long, and it's fairly opaque to parties as changes progress through its process and the associated governance. So again, there are three main parts to pull out of this work. The first part is around reviewing the existing process and mapping the improvements that we've identified through the workshops that we've held over the last few months, with a view to rationalising and streamlining the process and really taking some of the time out. The second component is around defining and testing the feasibility of a small change process to run alongside the RECC change process. And this is really in recognition of the fact that there are some changes that we can do that can be a lot more agile in nature, that probably don't require the full extent of governance as it will be applied through the RECC change process, which would allow us to do things a lot more quickly and probably more cost effectively, to deliver things sooner than we would normally need to, or we normally could do through the normal process, where that level of governance isn't required. So it can be a lot more effective with the implementation of some smaller changes. And then the third component is basically redefining the release approach that we've currently got in place to support a more logical and agile change deployment. And what I mean by that is that if we think about the small change process, if we can get that in, then what we don't want to be doing is constraining ourselves to the RECC release schedule, which is a couple of times a year. We could look for other opportunities of releasing more regularly, so we're deploying those changes more regularly. And when we talk about logical grouping of changes, it's looking at the changes that we have in pipeline to be delivered and working out, well, actually, are there some changes that complement each other, or actually we could deliver more benefits by tying some changes together and delivering them in a particular way or through a particular release. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about redefining the release approach. From a benefits perspective, so logically, we would expect to reduce the overall cost of change as we streamline the process and the governance, and we develop the ability to deploy change more quickly. On a practical note, we'd expect industry satisfaction to improve as the process becomes not only quicker but also more transparent, and we've got improved comms and engagement throughout the redefined process that we'd start to put into place. And from a consumer's perspective, if we've got changes that are ultimately tied to some sort of consumer benefit, then there would be benefits there of releasing changes more quickly, because we can get those changes in quicker and they can start to see the benefit quicker. And you'll see from this plan that we expect to start to get the new process in place roughly in Q3 of this regulatory year. Okay, so that's run through of the change management work stream. If we move on to the next one, please. So engagement and communications. So as we examined each of the focus areas through the workshops over the last few months, it did become fairly apparent that the comms and engagement landscape has become a bit fragmented since the service went live, and doesn't really seem to be meeting the needs of either parties or DCC and RECCo in its current form. So whilst each of the work streams that we've got is considering the comms and the engagement it does at a process level, what this work stream is setting out to try and achieve is looking more holistically at the stakeholders of the service and why and when and how we engage with each other, with a view to developing a strategy which meets stakeholder needs, which is more reflective of the way the service is used today, and adds a bit more value to the touch points and the interactions we all have with each other. So principles around the development of this work are quite simple, and the plan activities that we've got focus around these. And again, continuing the theme of three, there are three broad principles really that we're sort of working to. The first one is making sure that as the service is used today and the way that customers use the service, then we need to make sure that we are really conscious of who our stakeholders are, and who we need to contact, who we need to engage with, and why, and what purpose. So obviously important knowing who's your comms engagement plan about, and that's not necessarily been kept up to date or as current as it could be. And then through a mix of stakeholder engagement and considering the improvement areas that we've identified, we're looking to develop a strategy which does meet everyone's needs and starts to add value. And then ultimately, we're looking to roll out the improvements that we identified through that strategy. And you know, they will cover a broad range of things. And the scope of that will include things like the regular communications that get issued, the channels that we use for such communications, the meetings that take place, the various forums that we operate and whether or not they need reviewing or repurposing or new additions need adding in. And then I think an important point that we did identify is actually maintaining an awareness and general knowledge around the operation and the future direction of the service. So as part of this piece of work, we're looking at how do we get better at running education sessions and improving knowledge generally and self-serve capability around knowledge share. So the benefits around this one. So again, whilst a lot of this could be efficiency and making more efficient use of people's time, so there could be some pound signs attached to this. We're not attaching any direct efficiency savings necessarily to the engagement and comms work streams, but in terms of customer effort, this is all geared around making sure that we're improving transparency and making it much easier for users to engage with the switching service and with the people that run it. Okay, so that's the engagement and comms work stream. We move on to the next one, please. So, incident management. Now, the bulk of the improvements in the incident management really focus again on a similar sort of theme. So it's a lot of it's around communications and keeping parties updated with progress as we go through the incident process. And there are a few things that we called out that we know as we went through the workshops of the way that the incident management process currently runs. So the first thing that was called out loud and clear is that we know that the incident categories and the prioritizations haven't necessarily kept pace with current service experience and expectations, and again the way in which users are using the service today. And we recognise that instant updates have not always hitting the mark when updates are put into tickets. Second thing that we know that the service desk handles a lot of inquiries from parties that actually could be removed by either better education, so building back on the theme that I mentioned in the previous workstream, or providing better access to data. The service desk gets a lot of requests for things that could be resolved if parties have better access to particular sorts of data. And the other thing that we know in terms of where service desk spends a fair chunk of its time is that we know that the closure of incidents and feedback on resolution is not always as timely as it could be, and the service desk does spend a lot of time chasing parties for closure and resolution. And that's hampered further by the fact that the governance arrangements around the maintenance of contact details is not necessarily as robust as it could be. So often we're chasing contacts that are no longer in position, so that needs some shoring up as well. So to address that little bundle of things, we're scoping a series of ServiceNow changes, and I'll just run through what we're looking to scope, which will support improvements in each of those areas. So we're looking to update the ServiceNow templates to be more reflective of the categories that are being used today, so updating the category descriptions. We're looking at introducing automated routing to parties and resolver groups, so that will take out any sort of manual routing activity that's required, particularly within the service desk. We're also looking at how we manage third-party incident management, and what I mean by that is we've got a number of users of the service that almost subcontract, if you like, their incident management activities to a managed service provider. And the processes for engaging and interacting with those managed service providers are not always clear. So we're doing some work in that front as well, and looking at what changes we need to make to ServiceNow to facilitate the better engagement and interaction with MSPs in that space. And then finally, the other change that we're looking to scope is around improving the post-resolution feedback and the closure around incidents. So we expect to have the requirements for all of those things done by the middle of June, and they will then feed into the change process and be bundled off for an impact assessment for us to get the costs and the timescales back. But the view that we're currently working to at the moment, and there are a number of caveats around this and health warnings, are that we will be hopeful to get those changes though bundled into the November rec release, which is what we're currently working to try and achieve. From a benefit perspective, again, from an efficiency perspective, what we'd ultimately expect to see will be improved productivity of the service desk team through ultimately the removal of any duplication or waste through the things that we've just called out. And then from a more qualitative point of view, I think through improving the engagement, the quality of information that's in tickets and some of these changes that we're adding in, we would hope to see increased industry satisfaction and reduced effort of engaging with the incident management process as a result of making these changes. Okay, so if we move on to the next one. Okay, last but not least, so the fifth work stream is the reporting work stream. Now, again, as we examine this, a bit of a revelation that the CRS does produce a lot of reports, and as we were working through the detail, there were numbers being bandied about that were actually in the region of around about 90,000 reports surfaced that were either produced or needed to be stored somewhere within the service. So one of the things that we do know is that a lot of the reports that are produced are not used, but we're not really sure why that is. It could be that the reports are not useful, or it could be that users don't know what's there. So one of the initial focuses of this work stream is basically the review and the rationalisation of the existing reporting catalogue. And what we expect that to lead to is a bit of a cost saving if we can reduce the number of reports and the associated processing and the storage needs associated with those reports. But going back to the fact of, how do we get to that position where we can rationalise the reports? Well, what we're not looking at doing is just removing things carte blanche. We need to make sure that any reporting that takes place, like everything else, is useful, it's serving a purpose. And if it isn't, then we look at how do we need to amend it and rationalise the existing catalogue to make sure it's meeting, again, users' needs with how the service is being used today. So to support this, we will be seeking, again, common theme, we'll be seeking your input to help us identify which reports are actively used or needed, or what's missing, what gaps have we got, so that we can then start to define a reporting catalogue that is useful, and we're confident that it's actually adding value. Now, the analysis is already underway of this in this work stream, and we will be running, as you can see, a series of improvement sprints, which is that initial rationalisation on the plan, for around about 6 months, at which points that we'll be able to take stock of the impacts and the benefits. But during that period, and kicking off in probably next month, as we'll come to in the later slide, we will be seeking your input to help us make sure that we're focusing on the right things from a reporting point of view. Okay, so next slide. Okay, and now this has appeared in the right place. So is there anything else that you think we should be focusing on that we've not discussed or have not covered off within that run through of the work streams and what we're setting out to achieve?
Jason, just while we're waiting for that, there are a couple of questions that might just be worth pointing towards while we're just waiting for responses to come in. There's one with regard to the timeline and the plans that you've shared. So there's one question that says, appreciate the need to look at this. However, Sprint 1 aligns very heavily with the run-up to DNO's market half-hourly settlement go-live dates. Has this been considered on the level of input from key parties, both to attend working groups and deal with data cleanse?
Yeah, so simple answer to that is yes, and we do acknowledge that there are lots of things that will be going on. So what we're not necessarily looking to do through this work is mandating engagement, but we need to work out as part of the engagement strategy what is going to work best, appreciating that there are demands, and it might be that we're not scattergunning everybody, right? So part of what we're going to be doing over the coming weeks is identifying the right people to engage with, and it might be that we do it on a basis that we've got some working groups that are set up and then we share with the broader community, but that's working through at the moment. But yeah, what we're not looking to do is that start to roll out an en masse engagement piece that we're expecting everybody to have to drop everything and contribute to. But it is important on the other side of that, though, that we do get some valuable input to help us shape this in the right way.
Cheers. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so we will answer some of the other ones towards the end.
Yeah, we have got some time at the end, so I think any questions or comments we can pick up with me and the team at the end. Okay, so work already in progress. So the work, one of the points that I wanted to make clear is that the work that we've discussed today, it supplements and sits behind work that's already in progress. So as you can imagine, running the switching service, we're not waiting for this plan to be rubber stamped before we kick off the improvement activity. So I wanted to just share some detail of some of the other activities, some of which is supportive of the plan and does perfectly align with the plan, just so everybody's clear and there aren't any misconceptions that nothing has been happening whilst we've been waiting for work on the plan to run through. So again, just picking out some key points that going through the lot on this slide from an address data quality point of view. Well, I've mentioned the linkages already to the AQP, and that's work which is continuously ongoing, so there hasn't been any break in that. And you can see the third bullet on this is that in terms of the analysis that I spoke about analysing the unmatched addresses, well, we're already well on the way with that, so that's underway. Change management workstream, I mentioned the small change process. Over the last few weeks, the RECCo and the DCC teams have got together to review that, and we've got to a point now where we've scoped a process that looks like it might work. So we're going through a bit of a feasibility assessment at the moment to work out, right, okay, so how would we enact that? Seek approval for it and then get it into place and start to operate it. From an incident management point of view, a number of changes going on there. I think the first one to call out, and this was a key theme that's been identified from the user community, is that the update to incident tickets is not always transparent and as good as it could be when changes or amendments are made. So there's been a lot of work which has been undertaken by the service desk team to remedy that, and hopefully you've started to see some improvements already of improved updates into some of the tickets. And then finally, from a reporting point of view, so already on with the analysis of data, we've got 3 months worth of reporting data where we're looking at the types of reports, the frequency, the recipients, and we can see where reports are picked up and are utilised to start to give us some inputs into those sessions that I've mentioned that we're going to be looking to establish with some parts of the user community to help us shape that a bit further. Okay, so next slide. So next steps. I've mentioned more than once, and I think I did warn you, you'd hear it a few times, but as we continue refining the plan and our view on the cost, the benefits and the prioritisation position, we will be seeking your help and support. So you might have spotted in the milestone plans, and accept the fact that we've had a bit of a whistle-stop tour this afternoon, but you'll obviously get to see this pack. You'll see in the plans the red markers are in there around the points of engagement at the moment. That will develop and evolve. But we're going to start to kick off some focus sessions in June to start to delve into a bit more detail. And yeah, I've given the reasons why that's important. It's really important that we know that we're aligned and we're focused on the right areas, but the key input for us is understanding, so why are we doing these things and where do we expect to drive some benefit, which ultimately might help us determine priorities where we need to. So a bit of a sneak preview of some of the sessions that we're looking to establish, and look, accepting the fact of the question that's already been raised around, we need to recognise that there are other calls on various parts of the industry. So how do we do this in the most effective way? We're cognizant of that, so we will make sure that we're doing this as efficiently as possible. But we're going to start to reach out and focus on address data quality. I've mentioned it's really important for us that as we start to get better clarity and granularity of what's in the unmatched pots, that we can really clearly articulate the impact of addresses being in that state and what does it mean from an industry and from a consumer point of view. Change management, we're really keen to start to gather thoughts on a more formal approach to user testing to feed into the new process. Engagement and comms, so again, this is important. So getting feedback on current engagement and comms as it stands. So engagement events, the comms channels, the forums that are in place, do we think they're effective? Are they not? Reasons why not? What do we need to evolve to make sure that the touch points that we have between ourselves are effective and supporting value for all of those involved? Incident management. I know that this is a bit of a rolling engagement anyway. There's always lots of dialogue in the incident management space, but we'll be seeking feedback on the changes that are being made, and particularly around the categorisation and the prioritisation issues that we've seen. And as mentioned in the last update reporting, there are a lot of reports which are produced. We're not really quite sure that all of those are useful. So again, we'll be reaching out for some input into needs and understanding whether or not they're currently met. So all of that's intended to start to take place in June. So as I've said, we'll look at the best way of doing that and working out who best to engage with, so we're not overwhelming people. But in the meantime, we're really keen to get your feedback on what you've heard today. We've got a Q&A section and some time for that coming up in a minute, but what you'll also get following this webinar is you'll get a survey. So I would encourage everybody please to fill in the survey, and all feedback is good. So yeah, anything that you've got either in terms of the presentation itself or the content or things that you might have missed, you believe that we may have missed, then please take the time to fill out the survey, and thank you for giving us your time today. But before we all run away, we've got some time for Q&A. So I guess we've got a couple of things. It would be interesting to understand what we've got from the Slido input, and again, any questions. I can't see what's in the chat, so any questions or comments that anybody might have, we're happy to field.
There is another question in the chat. Has the customer's version of their addresses been considered as something the customer can update? Supplier versions of addresses are often different to postal addresses. It's not one that we've considered as of yet, but we can certainly take it away and have a look. I think the one thing we're working through certainly at the moment is how do we ensure that the varied view of the outstanding addresses are reviewed. So the outstanding pot that we've got, how can we get under the skin of it, categorize it, and make sure that we start to understand how much of it is addressable. So we are working through that, so we can have a look at that.
We've
Any
also
other
got
questions?
a question in the Q&A from Nicola Garland.
Sorry, say that again, Laura.
And there's a question in the Q&A box.
Opening it up now. How are RECCo and DCC going to ensure that address improvement is tackled centrally rather than pushed onto the DNOs, GTs and suppliers? So do you want me to say that, Jason? Or?
Yeah, I'll let you take that, Bilal.
Cool. So we're doing a few things in this space, Nicola. So what we're doing is we know that we already engage with, as you say, DNOs, GT, so on and so forth. What we're looking to do is work through between ourselves and RECCo a clear alignment and a plan in terms of what can we collectively do with all of the relevant parties who are involved in address matching, and what are the key actions that each of the parties need to take. So this is not a just push everything onto DNOs or GTs. It's to ensure that the relevant parties who are involved, whether that be, yourselves, suppliers, and other relevant parties, i.e. the suppliers we work with, Landmark and so on and so forth, are all working towards driving improvements in addresses. We have already done some things in the background over the last 6 months that have already driven some improvements, and that's internally, we've done that with Landmark. So yeah, absolutely, we're looking at all angles at the moment.
There's another question in the chat, Bilal, off Elaine Carr.
Bouncing back to the chat now.
Bouncing back to chat.
How's the work that DCC has been doing on the address quality tying in with the work that RECCo are doing in relation to issue 200, which is also a really good question. I thought that RECCo were looking at assessing what was addressable. Yeah, so we're working really closely with RECCo. So Anton and a few other people who are involved in that, as well as GemServe, who are leading the issue, we are working closely with as we move forward to implement the plan in terms of roles and responsibilities. We're absolutely not looking to duplicate effort. So there are elements of categories that you're right that they're looking at, which are addressable. There's things that obviously we've got access to being the CSS provider in terms of data that we will link in with those relevant stakeholders. So we will work collaboratively with them to ensure there's no duplication. Any other questions?
I think, Bilal, just to add to that as well, we're also working closely with them so that there isn't any additional requests going out to market participants. It'll be one request coming from both areas as well.
Yeah, great.
We've just got another question in the Q&A from Glenn Peters.
So look, for new build supplies, presumably suppliers DNOs will create the entries for these new properties. What vetting will be in place for new builds, especially where plot numbers change to house numbers, often causing mix-ups? So I haven't got the answer to that directly, Glenn. It's one that we can take away and have a look. I know the plot to postal kind of has definitely caused us challenges in the past. We'll certainly pick that up and have a look. We've got any more come through, Laura?
Nothing from my side.
Got a few minutes left. Feel free to put something in the chat or put your hand up. No, I think we're done.
No. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate the fact that it does look like we started to get some of the survey results through. So we'll review those offline and pick through that. Thank you all very much for your time. I hope you found it useful and informative. I hope it's given you a bit of an insight into the areas that we're looking at. And I also hope that the things that we've talked about resonate with you. If they don't, then please tell us. And particularly if we've missed anything, please tell us. But yeah, as I've said, all feedback gratefully received, whether it's through the survey or whether it's directly to any of us that are on the call today. And again, please do look out for the survey that's going to come out and fill that in. But yeah, thank you all very much, and I hope you found it useful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.